Chapter 1. The Ghost of Christmas Past. Ron Garner had never believed silence could feel so loud until that night 5 years ago. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, that hums like static in your bones. He stood in the doorway of his parents' dining room, the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon rolls curling through the air like a cruel joke. They didn't hear him at first. Why would they? They were laughing, his parents, his older brother, and the woman Ron had planned to marry. Faithful laughter, familiar voices, and her, Melissa, throwing her head back, eyes shining, like she belonged there more than he ever had. Ron's fingers tightened around the bottle of wine he'd brought, the one he'd imagined uncorking after sliding a ring onto her finger. He'd rehearsed the proposal in his head 100 times. He'd pictured her crying, saying yes, hugging him while his family cheered. Instead, he was the ghost at his own Christmas. Melissa's hand rested on his brother's arm like it had always been meant to. Ron felt the truth before anyone spoke it. The betrayal wasn't a knife. It was a slow, cold tide rising in his chest. He cleared his throat. Once, twice. The sound cracked through their laughter like a gunshot. Heads turned. Faces froze. Ron. His mother started, voice trembling with excuses he didn't care to hear. He cut her off with a calmness that surprised even him. You are all dead to me. His voice was steady, almost gentle, like he was offering a benediction. Merry Christmas. The wine bottle hit the trash can on his way out. He didn't slam the door, didn't shout. Rage would have meant he cared enough to fight. By New Year's, Ron was gone, new city, new apartment, new number. He deleted contacts like clearing a virus. Friends, family, Melissa, all of them. That chapter was ash, and he wasn't dragging embers into his new life. He rebuilt quietly. A job in digital marketing. A modest apartment with clean lines and no clutter. Hobbies that asked nothing of him but focus. Graphic design, web layouts, digital art. Things that didn't lie, didn't cheat, didn't laugh behind his back. He was 32 now. Successful, respected at work, even liked. But never close. Never vulnerable. And Christmas? Christmas was its own kind of hell. He didn't fight the memories anymore. He let them come like waves, crashing and receding. He didn't decorate, didn't celebrate. He endured. July sunlight spilled through his apartment windows, warm and indifferent. Ron sat at his desk, stylus in hand, sketching a logo for a client. Independence Day had passed in a blur of quiet. Just him, his tablet, and a playlist of instrumental jazz. Back at the office, coworkers swapped stories of barbecues and fireworks. Ron smiled when appropriate, nodded at punchlines, but offered nothing. Nobody noticed, and he liked it that way. His life wasn't reality TV. Then his supervisor cleared their throat. Team, meet Faith Lowry. Ron looked up, and for the first time in years, something shifted. She was stunning, but not in the glossy magazine way. Wavy chestnut hair framed a face that was all warmth and sapphire eyes that seemed to see more than they should. Her smile wasn't practiced. It reached her eyes like sunlight breaking through clouds. Hi, everyone, she said, voice smooth, carrying a note of humor like she was already in on the joke. Ron told himself it didn't matter. She was a colleague. He had boundaries. Faith apparently hadn't read his rulebook. Chapter 2. Ordinary days. Ron Garner believed in clean lines on his desk, in his life, and in his boundaries. Work was work. Personal was personal. He didn't mix the two because mixing things led to messes, and messes led to pain. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. The office buzzed with the usual Monday energy. Keyboards clacking, phones ringing, the faint hum of the copier in the corner. Ron sat at his workstation, reviewing campaign metrics for a client whose idea of urgent was sending emails at midnight. He liked the rhythm of analytics, the neat columns, the predictable patterns. Numbers didn't betray you. Ron. His supervisor's voice broke through his thoughts. Got a minute? He swiveled his chair, expecting another last-minute request. Instead, the supervisor gestured toward a woman standing beside them. Meet Faith Lowry. She's joining the team. Ron's gaze landed on her, and for a second, his brain short-circuited. She was smiling, warm, genuine, like she'd been waiting all day to meet him. Chestnut waves framed her face, and her sapphire eyes held a spark that made the fluorescent lights seem less harsh. Hi, she said, extending a hand. Her nails were short, neat, painted a soft pink that somehow suited her. I've heard good things about you. Ron shook her hand, professional, polite. Welcome aboard. Her grip was firm, confident. Thanks. I'm excited to be here. He nodded, retreating behind the invisible wall he'd spent years building. She was a colleague. That was all. He turned back to his screen, but her voice lingered like a melody he couldn't shake. Faith didn't seem to notice his walls, or maybe she did and didn't care. By noon, she'd already introduced herself to half the department and had everyone laughing over a story about getting lost in the subway her first week in the city. Ron listened from his desk, pretending to focus on his spreadsheet while his ears betrayed him. She had that kind of presence, the kind that made people lean in like warmth in a cold room. He told himself it didn't matter. He had rules. He didn't let people in. Not anymore. 2 weeks passed, and Faith was everywhere. Not in an intrusive way. She wasn't clingy or loud, but in a way that made Ron notice things he hadn't noticed in years. How the office felt lighter when she walked in. How her laughter had a rhythm that made even bad days tolerable. She stopped by his desk one afternoon, holding a coffee cup like a peace offering. "You always eat lunch at your desk?" Ron glanced at his half-eaten sandwich. "Usually. You know there's a whole cafeteria downstairs, right? With actual chairs and tables." "I'm aware." Her smile widened. "Come on. One lunch won't kill you." He hesitated. Boundaries, rules, but something in her tone, casual teasing, made it hard to say no. "Fine," he said, surprising himself. One lunch. The cafeteria was loud, filled with chatter and clinking silverware. Ron sat across from Faith, feeling oddly exposed without his desk as a shield. She stirred her coffee, eyes bright. "So," she said, "what do you do when you're not saving clients from marketing disasters?" Ron shrugged. "Work, sleep, repeat." She tilted her head. "That's bleak." "It's efficient." Faith laughed, and the sound did something to him. Something he didn't want to name. "Come on, you've got hobbies." "Everyone has hobbies." He hesitated, then admitted, "Digital art, graphics, web design." Her eyebrows lifted. "That's amazing. Do you sell your work?" "No, it's just something I do. I'd love to see it sometime." Ron felt the old instinct to retreat, to shut the door before it opened too wide. But instead he said, "Maybe." Faith grinned like she'd won a small victory. "I'll take maybe." Over the next few weeks, maybe turned into coffee breaks, shared jokes, and conversations that stretched longer than they should have. Ron found himself looking forward to her smile, her questions, the way she listened like his words mattered. He told himself it was harmless, just friendship. But when she brushed his arm one day and his pulse jumped like a startled bird, he knew he was lying. One Friday afternoon, Faith leaned against his doorway, casual as sunlight. "Coffee after work?" Ron stared at her, every instinct screaming no. Coffee led to talking. Talking led to trust. Trust led to heartbreak. He'd built his life on avoiding that chain reaction. But then she smiled, soft, hopeful, and something inside him cracked. "Okay," he said. "Coffee." The cafe was quiet, all warm wood and soft jazz. Ron sat across from Faith, nursing a latte he didn't taste. She was telling a story about her niece's obsession with glitter, and he was laughing, actually laughing, like he hadn't in years. For the first time since that night 5 years ago, Ron wasn't thinking about the past. He wasn't bracing for betrayal. He was here in this moment with her, and it terrified him. Chapter 3: Coffee and Cracks. Ron Garner had never been good at small talk. He preferred conversations with purpose, meetings, project updates, things that had a clear start and finish. Coffee dates didn't fit that category. They were messy, unpredictable, full of silences that demanded to be filled. And yet, here he was, sitting across from Faith Lowry in a cafe that smelled like cinnamon and roasted beans, wondering how he'd let this happen. Faith stirred her cappuccino, the spoon clinking softly against porcelain. "You look like you're regretting this already," she teased, her sapphire eyes glinting with amusement. Ron shook his head. "Just not used to this." "What? Coffee?" Her lips curved into a smile. "Or people?" He gave her a look, and she laughed. A warm, easy sound that made the tension in his shoulders loosen a fraction. "Fair enough," she said. "So, tell me something about you that isn't work-related." Ron hesitated. He could deflect, make a joke, keep it surface level. That was safe. But something about the way she leaned in, genuinely curious, made him want to give her more than the polished version. "I like creating things," he said finally. "Digital art, graphics, web design." Faith's eyebrows lifted. "That's amazing. Do you have a portfolio?" "No," he said quickly. "It's just, for me." "Still," she said, her voice softening. "That's really cool. Most people binge Netflix when they're stressed. You make art." Ron shrugged, uncomfortable with the compliment. "It helps me focus." Faith smiled like she understood more than he'd said. "I'd love to see your work sometime." He didn't answer, couldn't. Letting her see his art felt like letting her see his pulse. Too intimate, too risky. The conversation drifted to safer ground: movies, music, the city's best coffee spots. Faith talked with her hands, animated and bright, and Ron found himself watching the way her fingers danced in the air, the way her laughter seemed to fill the space without crowding it. For the first time in years, he wasn't counting the minutes until he could leave. He wasn't thinking about the past or bracing for the next disappointment. He was here in this moment, and it felt good. Terrifying, but good. When they stepped outside, the city was draped in late summer gold, the kind of light that made everything look softer. Faith turned to him, her smile easy. "Thanks for saying yes," she said. "I know it wasn't your first instinct." Ron managed a half-smile. "You're persistent." "Guilty," she said, grinning. "But worth it, right?" He didn't answer, but the corner of his mouth lifted, and that was enough for her. Over the next few weeks, coffee turned into lunch, lunch into walks after work, and walks into evenings where Ron forgot to check the time. Faith had a way of making ordinary things feel like events. A shared joke over bad office coffee. A debate about the best pizza in the city. A story about her niece that left him laughing harder than he had in years. He told himself it was harmless, just companionship. But when she brushed his arm one day and his pulse jumped like a startled bird, he knew he was lying. By October, the air had cooled, and so had Ron's resolve. He was in deeper than he'd planned, and the truth was he didn't want out. Faith had become a fixture in his life, a bright thread woven through the gray fabric of his days. One evening, as they walked past a row of shops glowing with early holiday lights, Faith glanced at him, her breath misting in the chill. "My family does a big Thanksgiving," she said. "You should come." Ron stopped, the word family hitting him like a sudden gust. He hadn't sat at a family table in 5 years. He hadn't wanted to. "I don't know," he said carefully. Faith's smile was gentle, not pushy. "Just think about it. No pressure." He nodded, but inside, the old walls were rattling. Family meant risk. Family meant pain. But Faith wasn't his past. She was something else. Something he wasn't sure he deserved but couldn't stop wanting. Chapter 4: Building Bridges. Ron Garner wasn't sure when his life had started to feel different. It wasn't dramatic. No fireworks. No sweeping orchestral score. But something had shifted. He noticed it in small ways. The way his apartment felt less like a bunker and more like a place he wanted to come back to. The way his mornings didn't feel like a countdown to quitting time. Faith Lowry had a way of doing that, changing the temperature of a room without trying. She didn't demand attention. She earned it, quietly, like sunlight slipping through blinds. They were sitting in a corner booth at a little Italian place near the office, the kind of spot with mismatched chairs and candles and old wine bottles. Faith twirled pasta around her fork, her eyes bright as she told a story about her niece's obsession with glitter crafts. "She glued sequins to the dog," Faith said, laughing. "Poor Max looked like a disco ball." Ron chuckled, surprising himself. "Sounds festive." "Oh, it was. My sister nearly lost her mind." Faith grinned, then tilted her head. "You're good with kids?" Ron blinked. "I don't know. Haven't been around any in years." Faith's smile softened. "Family far away?" He hesitated, the question brushing against a locked door in his chest. "Something like that." She didn't push. She just nodded, like she understood that some answers weren't ready yet. Over the next few weeks, their dinners became a rhythm, easy, unforced. They talked about everything and nothing. Favorite movies, worst jobs, the merits of pineapple on pizza. Faith teased him about his minimalist apartment. "It looks like a furniture catalog." "Ron, where's the personality?" And he teased her about her habit of humming Christmas songs in October. "You know it's not even Halloween yet?" he said one night as they walked past a store window decked out in fake snow and twinkling lights. "Christmas is a season, not a day," she replied, grinning. "You'll see." Ron didn't argue, but inside, the word Christmas still felt like a bruise. By mid-October, something had changed. Ron wasn't just enjoying Faith's company, he was craving it. The way she listened, really listened like his words mattered. The way she laughed at his dry humor and didn't flinch at his silences. He found himself sketching late at night, not for clients but for her. Little things he never showed her, like a logo shaped like a snowflake or a digital painting of a winter cabin. He told himself it was just practice, but deep down, he knew better. One crisp evening, Faith brought it up. "My family does a big Thanksgiving," she said as they strolled past a row of shops glowing with early holiday lights. Her breath misted in the chill, and her scarf fluttered in the breeze. "You should come." Ron stopped, the word family hitting him like a sudden gust. He hadn't sat at a family table in 5 years. He hadn't wanted to. "I don't know," he said carefully. Faith's smile was gentle, not pushy. "Just think about it. No pressure." He nodded, but inside, the old walls were rattling. Family meant risk. Family meant pain. But Faith wasn't his past. She was something else. Something he wasn't sure he deserved but couldn't stop wanting. Later that night, Ron sat in his apartment, staring at the glow of his monitor. He opened a blank canvas and started sketching. A table set for Thanksgiving, warm light spilling across polished wood, 2 chairs pulled close together. He didn't know why he drew it. Maybe because part of him wanted to believe he could sit at that table without feeling like an intruder. Maybe because Faith's voice lingered in his head, soft and hopeful. Just think about it. And for the first time in years, he did. Chapter 5: Mall Misunderstanding. The mall was a riot of holiday cheer. Twinkling lights strung across railings, garlands draped like velvet ribbons, and the faint hum of carols floating from hidden speakers. Ron Garner hated it. Every glittering ornament felt like a reminder of everything he'd lost. Every cheerful melody like a needle pricking old wounds. But he was here for a reason. Faith had invited him to Thanksgiving with her family, and he wanted to make a good impression. A small gift for her parents, something thoughtful for her sister, who, according to Faith, was fun and a little unpredictable. Ron wandered through the department store, scanning shelves of candles and gourmet chocolates. He was debating between a maple-scented candle and a box of artisan truffles when movement caught his eye. Chestnut waves. A familiar tilt of the head. Faith. She was walking hand in hand with a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a navy coat that looked expensive. They stopped in front of a boutique window, laughing about something inside. Then she kissed him. Not a friendly peck. A kiss that spoke of intimacy, of belonging. Ron froze, the box of chocolates slipping from his fingers and landing with a muted thud on the carpet. No, he couldn't be seeing this. But he was. Faith was standing there, lips curved against another man's mouth like Ron didn't exist. Like the past 5 months had been a joke he hadn't gotten. The mall blurred around him. Voices became static. His chest felt tight, like someone had cinched a rope around his ribs. He didn't confront her, didn't storm over and demand answers. He'd done that once before, walked into a room and found betrayal smiling back at him. He wasn't giving history a second chance to humiliate him. Instead, he turned and walked away, his pulse pounding in his ears. By the time Ron reached his apartment, the anger had cooled into something worse, resignation. He'd been a fool to think he could outrun the past. People didn't change. Trust was a loaded gun, and he'd pulled the trigger on himself. He sat at his desk, staring at the blank screen, but his hands wouldn't move. The stylus felt heavy, useless. All he could see was Faith's smile, soft, warm, and the way it had turned into a blade without warning. The next day at work, Ron flipped the switch. Professional mode. No warmth, no lingering glances, no private jokes. Faith stopped by his desk with her usual smile, and he gave her nothing but clipped answers. "Morning," she said brightly. "Morning," he replied, eyes on his monitor. She frowned, just slightly, but didn't press. "Not yet." By lunch, she was trying harder. "Want to grab a bite?" "Busy," he said without looking up. Her smile faltered. "Okay." Ron kept his tone even, his posture rigid. He wanted witnesses. People who could say he wasn't a creep, wasn't bitter, wasn't anything but professional. Because if he let himself slip, if he let the hurt show, he'd unravel. Faith didn't understand. How could she? Just days ago, they'd been laughing over coffee, planning Thanksgiving like it was the most natural thing in the world. Now he was acting like she didn't exist. By Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, she'd had enough. Ron was in his office, pretending to read an email, when the door swung open. Faith stood there, her eyes blazing with confusion and something sharper. "Okay," she said, shutting the door behind her. "What is going on?" Ron didn't look up. "I'm working." "Don't do that," she snapped. "Don't give me the cold, professional routine. You've been avoiding me for days." "Why?" He exhaled slowly, then met her gaze. "I saw you." Faith blinked. "Saw me what?" "At the mall," he said, his voice flat. "With your boyfriend." Her brows knitted. "My what?" "The guy you kissed," Ron said, the words tasting like ash. "I'm not doing this, Faith. I'm not signing up for chaos." For a moment, she just stared at him, then burst out laughing. Ron stiffened. "Glad you find it funny." Faith held up her hands, still laughing but trying to rein it in. Okay, stop. Describe him." Ron frowned. Tall, dark hair, navy coat. Looked like he stepped out of a magazine. Faith was already pulling out her phone. "David," she muttered, scrolling through photos. She turned the screen toward him. A picture of her standing beside a man who looked exactly like the one at the mall. Ron's jaw tightened. "That's him." Faith grinned, triumphant. "That's my brother-in-law." Ron blinked. "You're what?" "My sister's husband," she said, still smiling. "You saw Hope." "Hope. My twin," Faith said, flipping to another photo. This one of her and a woman who looked so much like her it was unsettling. Identical outfits, identical smiles. Ron stared, speechless. Faith's laughter softened into something warm. "You thought I was cheating on you?" He rubbed the back of his neck, heat crawling up his collar. "You could have mentioned you had a doppelganger." Faith chuckled. "Guess I should have. But hey, at least you care." Ron groaned, burying his face in his hands. "I'm an idiot." "Maybe," she said, her voice teasing but gentle. "But you're my idiot." Chapter 6, The Confrontation Aftermath. Ron Garner had faced some humiliating moments in his life, but standing in his office with Faith laughing so hard she had tears in her eyes was climbing the charts fast. "I'm glad you're enjoying this," he muttered, dragging a hand down his face. Faith tried to stifle her laughter, failing spectacularly. "Ron, you thought I was cheating on you? With my sister's husband? You didn't tell me you had a twin," he shot back, his voice sharper than intended. "That's relevant information." Faith grinned, still catching her breath. "Relevant? You think I should lead with that?" "Hi, I'm Faith, and by the way, there's another one of me roaming the earth." "Yes," Ron said flatly. "That would have been helpful." She softened, her smile turning warm. "I'm sorry. I didn't think it mattered." Ron exhaled, the tension in his chest loosening just enough to let embarrassment flood in. "I made an idiot of myself." Faith stepped closer, her tone gentler now. "You made an assumption. A wrong one, sure. But it means you care." Ron met her gaze, and for a moment, the air between them felt charged, like static before a storm. He wanted to say something, anything, but words tangled in his throat. Faith broke the silence with a teasing smile. So, are you still coming to Thanksgiving? Or should I warn Hope that you're avoiding her? Ron groaned. You're never letting me live this down, are you? Not a chance, she said, her laughter bubbling again. But seriously, come. It'll be fun. Fun. The word felt foreign, but he nodded anyway. Okay. Thanksgiving Day, the Lowry family home was a sprawling two-story with a wraparound porch and a yard littered with golden leaves. Warm light spilled from the windows, and the scent of roasted turkey drifted into the crisp November air. Ron stood on the porch, clutching a bottle of wine like a lifeline. His pulse thudded in his ears. He hadn't done this family gatherings holiday cheer in 5 years. His last memory of a Thanksgiving table was a silent room and a slammed door. Faith opened the door, her smile bright enough to cut through his nerves. You made it. Barely, Ron said, stepping inside. The house was alive with laughter and clinking dishes. A fire crackled in the living room, and garlands of autumn leaves framed the mantel. It was warm, chaotic, and nothing like the cold, brittle holidays of his past. Faith led him into the dining room, where a long table gleamed under soft light. Her parents greeted him with hugs that felt startlingly genuine. Her father was tall and broad-shouldered, her mother petite with kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. And then Hope. Ron froze for half a second when he saw her. Identical chestnut waves, identical sapphire eyes. If not for the subtle difference in energy, the softer cadence of her voice, the way her smile tilted just slightly, he might have panicked all over again. Ron, this is Hope, Faith said, amusement flickering in her eyes. And David. Hope grinned, her expression mischievous. So you're the guy who thought I was Faith. Ron felt heat crawl up his neck. Yeah, about that. Hope laughed, a sound so similar to Faith's it was uncanny. Don't worry, happens all the time. David's used to people thinking he's a homewrecker. David smirked. Adds excitement to life. Ron managed a weak smile. Glad I could contribute. Faith squeezed his arm, her touch grounding him. Come on, let's eat. Dinner was a blur of flavors and laughter. Faith's family was loud in the best way. Stories overlapping, jokes flying, everyone talking like they'd known each other forever. Ron found himself laughing too, the sound strange and wonderful in his own ears. At one point, Faith nudged him under the table. You okay? Ron looked around. The warm light, the easy smiles, the sense of belonging he hadn't felt in years, and nodded. Yeah, he said softly. I'm okay. Later, as they lingered over pie and coffee, Hope leaned toward Faith, her voice low but not low enough. He's a keeper, she whispered, and Ron caught every word. Faith shot her sister a look, cheeks flushing pink. Ron pretended not to hear, but inside, something shifted. A quiet, tentative hope blooming where old scars had lived. Chapter 7 Thanksgiving Chaos and the Invitation. Ron Garner had expected Thanksgiving to be awkward, maybe even painful, but what he hadn't expected was laughter. Real laughter, the kind that shook loose something heavy inside him. Faith's family was loud in the best way. Her father told stories with grand gestures, her mother kept refilling plates like feeding people was a competitive sport, and Hope was a whirlwind of teasing energy. So, Hope said, leaning across the table with a mischievous grin, you're the guy who thought I was Faith. Ron groaned, setting down his fork. Are we still on that? Forever, Hope declared. It's too good to waste. David, her husband, smirked. I feel oddly flattered. Faith rolled her eyes. Ignore them. They thrive on chaos. Ron managed to smile, though his ears burned. Noted. After dinner, the chaos moved to the living room. Someone put on music, and suddenly there was dancing. Faith's mom twirling with her dad. Hope pulling David into a ridiculous spin that ended with both of them laughing on the couch. Ron stood near the fireplace, nursing a glass of wine, watching it all like an outsider who'd somehow wandered into the warmest part of winter. He felt Faith slip beside him, her shoulder brushing his. You survived, she said softly. Barely, he murmured, but his lips curved. Faith's smile was gentle. They like you. Even after the mall incident? Especially after that, she teased. You gave them a story. Ron chuckled, shaking his head. Glad I could contribute. Later, when the laughter had softened into easy conversation, Faith's father clapped his hands together. All right, family meeting. Hope groaned. Dad, it's not a boardroom. Quiet, he said, grinning. We need to finalize Christmas plans. Ron stiffened. Christmas. The word slid under his skin like ice. Faith glanced at him, her expression unreadable, then turned back to her family. Colorado. Colorado, her father confirmed. Cabins booked. Skiing. Hot cocoa. The works. Hope clapped her hands. Yes. Snow angels and ugly sweaters. Faith's mother smiled warmly. Ron, you should come. Ron blinked. Me? Of course, she said, as if it were obvious. You're practically family now. Ron opened his mouth, closed it, then looked at Faith. She was watching him, her eyes soft, hopeful. You don't have to, she said quietly. But, I'd like you there. The room buzzed with chatter, plans for ski passes and cookie baking, but Ron barely heard any of it. His chest felt tight, not with panic, but with something stranger, something that felt dangerously close to belonging. He swallowed hard. "Okay," he said, his voice low but steady. "I'll come." Faith's smile lit up the room more than the fire ever could. That night, as Ron walked to his car under a sky scattered with stars, he felt the old ghost stirring, the memories of Christmases past, sharp and cold. But for the first time, they didn't feel like chains. They felt like shadows, fading at the edges of something new. Colorado. Snow. Faith. Maybe, just maybe, this Christmas would be different. Chapter 8, Winter Wonderland. The mountains rose like jagged teeth against a sky the color of polished steel. Snow blanketed everything. Rooftops, pines, winding roads, turning the world into a postcard Ron Garner wasn't sure he belonged in. He gripped the steering wheel as Faith's SUV climbed the last stretch toward the cabin. She was humming along to a Christmas playlist, her voice soft, unself-conscious. Ron stared straight ahead, pretending not to notice the way her smile made the cold feel less sharp. "You okay?" Faith asked, glancing at him. "Fine," Ron said, though his pulse was doing its own version of downhill skiing. "Just a lot of snow." Faith grinned. "That's kind of the point." The cabin came into view, a sprawling log home with smoke curling from the chimney and wreaths hanging on the doors. Warm light spilled from the windows, promising comfort against the icy air. Ron felt something twist in his chest. It looked like the kind of place where people belonged, where families laughed and memories were made. He wasn't sure he remembered how to do either. Inside, the cabin was alive with holiday chaos. Hope was draping garlands over the banister while David wrestled with a tree that looked like it had ambitions of world domination. Faith's parents were in the kitchen, voices mingling with the scent of cinnamon and roasting meat. "Ron," Hope called, spotting him as he stepped inside. "You made it. Ready for round 2. Ron managed to smile. "Define round 2. "Family traditions," she said, eyes sparkling. "You're about to be initiated." Faith laughed, tugging off her gloves. "Ignore her. It's not that bad." Hope grinned wickedly. "Says the woman who cried during the gingerbread contest last year." Faith shot her sister a look. "That was sabotage." David raised a hand. "For the record, I maintain my innocence." Ron chuckled, the sound surprising him. "What exactly am I signing up for?" Faith's father appeared, clapping him on the shoulder with a warmth that startled Ron. "Skiing tomorrow. Tonight, decorating, cocoa, and the annual ugly sweater draft." Ron blinked. "Draft?" Hope held up a box overflowing with sweaters so hideous they looked like crimes against fabric. "Pick your poison." Ron stared at a neon green monstrosity covered in felt reindeer. "You're kidding." Faith grinned. "Nope." Hours later, Ron was wearing the reindeer sweater, sipping cocoa by the fire while Faith's family argued over tree ornaments. He felt ridiculous and oddly happy. The cabin buzzed with laughter, the kind that filled spaces without crowding them. For the first time in years, Ron wasn't counting the minutes until he could leave. Faith settled beside him on the couch, her shoulder brushing his. "You look good in green," she teased. Ron gave her a look. "You're enjoying this way too much." "Guilty," she said, her smile softening. "Thanks for coming." He wanted to tell her what that meant, that being here felt like stepping into a world he thought he'd lost forever. Instead, he said, "You're welcome," and hoped she heard everything he couldn't say. Later, as the fire crackled and snow fell in lazy spirals outside, Ron found himself staring at the tree, its lights casting a warm glow across the room. He thought about the ghosts of Christmas past, the silence, the slammed door, the weight of betrayal, and realized something. For the first time in 5 years, Christmas didn't feel like a wound. Felt like a beginning. Chapter 9, Ski Slopes and Stumbles. Ron Garner had never been on skis in his life. He'd seen people glide down mountains in commercials, graceful, effortless like winter gods, but standing at the top of a beginner slope with 2 fiberglass planks strapped to his feet, he felt less like a god and more like a man about to meet gravity in a deeply personal way. Faith stood beside him, her cheeks pink from the cold, her breath puffing in soft clouds. She looked annoyingly perfect in her ski gear, sleek jacket, mirrored goggles perched on her helmet, confidence radiating like sunlight. "You're tense," she said, adjusting his stance with a gentle nudge to his knee. "Relax. Relax," Ron muttered. "I'm standing on a hill with sticks on my feet." Faith grinned. "You'll be fine. Just lean forward a little." "Forward? That sounds like a death wish." She laughed, the sound bright against the crisp air. "Trust me." Ron gave her a look. "That's a big ask." Faith's smile softened. "I know." Something in her tone, quiet, sincere, made his chest tighten. He swallowed hard, then nodded. "Okay." The first attempt was catastrophic. Ron pushed off, wobbled, and immediately forgot everything Faith had told him. His skis crossed, his balance vanished, and he went down in a spectacular sprawl that sent powder flying like confetti. Faith skied up, laughing so hard she nearly fell herself. "Are you okay?" Ron groaned, staring at the sky. "Define okay." She offered a gloved hand, her eyes dancing. Come on, rookie. He took her hand, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the warmth of her grip and the curve of her smile. Then gravity reminded him who was boss, and he slid another 2 feet before regaining his footing. By the third run, Ron was marginally less terrible. He still fell twice, but he also managed a stretch where he didn't look like a man auditioning for a slapstick comedy. Faith cheered like he'd won gold. Look at you. Natural talent. Ron snorted. If by natural you mean catastrophic. She grinned. Progress counts. They rode the lift back up, side by side, the mountains sprawling in silent majesty around them. Snowflakes drifted lazily, catching in Faith's hair like tiny stars. Ron watched her laugh at something Hope shouted from below, and the thought hit him like a sudden gust. He wanted this. Not just the moment, the whole messy, beautiful thing. The laughter, the warmth, the way Faith made the world feel less sharp. At the top, Faith turned to him, her expression softer now. You're doing great. Ron shook his head. I'm doing, not dead yet. She laughed, then sobered, her gaze searching his. Thanks for trying. He frowned. Why wouldn't I? Because, she said quietly, I know this isn't easy for you. Holidays, family, all of it. Ron's breath caught. He hadn't told her everything. Not the details, not the weight, but somehow she knew. It's complicated, he said finally. Faith nodded. I don't need the whole story. Just, thank you for being here. Ron looked at her, really looked, and something inside him shifted, like ice cracking under sunlight. I'm glad I came, he said softly. Faith's smile was slow, warm, and it felt like the start of something he didn't dare name. That night, back at the cabin, Ron sat by the fire with a mug of cocoa, watching Faith laugh with her family. The glow of the tree lights danced across her face, and he realized something with startling clarity. He wasn't just surviving Christmas. He was living it. Chapter 10, The Christmas Test. The cabin glowed like a lantern against the snow, its windows spilling golden light into the blue dusk. Inside, laughter bounced off timber walls as Faith's family gathered around the crackling fire for what Hope dramatically called the Christmas gauntlet. Ron sat on the couch, nursing a mug of cocoa, watching as Hope dumped a box of board games onto the rug like a dealer at a high-stakes table. First up, she announced, holiday trivia. Winner gets bragging rights and the last slice of pie. Faith groaned. You're insufferable. Accurate, Hope said cheerfully. Ron, you in? Ron hesitated. He wasn't exactly a holiday expert. His last 5 Christmases had been spent ignoring the season entirely, but Faith's expectant smile made saying no impossible. Sure, he said, setting down his mug. Prepare to lose. Hope grinned. Big talk for a rookie. The game was chaos. Questions flying, laughter erupting, David arguing over whether Die Hard counted as a Christmas movie. Ron surprised himself by holding his own, even winning a round thanks to a random guess about mistletoe traditions. Faith leaned close, her shoulder brushing his. Look at you, she teased. Holiday pro. Ron smirked. Beginner's luck. Her smile lingered, soft and warm, and for a moment, the noise around them faded. He wanted to kiss her, right there in front of everyone, but the weight of old scars held him back. Not yet. Not until he could breathe without ghosts crowding his chest. After trivia came cookie decorating, which devolved into a frosting war that left Ron with a smear of green icing on his cheek, and Faith laughing so hard she nearly dropped her piping bag. You're terrible at this, she said, holding up a cookie that looked like a snowman after a tornado. Ron grinned. Modern art. Faith laughed again, and the sound wrapped around him like warmth against the cold. Later, when the games were done and the fire burned low, Ron found himself alone on the porch, the night crisp and silent. Snowflakes drifted lazily, catching in the glow of the string lights. He gripped the railing, his breath misting in the air, and let the quiet settle. He'd been holding it in for days, the truth, the weight, the fear. But tonight, with laughter still echoing behind him and Faith's smile burned into his mind, he couldn't keep it locked away. He heard the door creak and turned to see Faith stepping out, wrapped in a blanket, her cheeks pink from the firelight. Cold out here, she said softly. Needed air, Ron replied. She joined him at the railing, her shoulder brushing his. You okay? Ron stared at the snow, words clawing their way up. I haven't done this in a long time. Family stuff? She asked gently. He nodded, throat tight. 5 years ago, Christmas. It was bad. I walked away from all of it. From them. Faith didn't speak, didn't press. She just waited. I thought I was done, Ron said, his voice low. Done with holidays, with trusting people. And then you, he broke off, shaking his head. You make it feel like maybe I was wrong. Faith's hand found his, warm against the cold. You weren't wrong to protect yourself, she said softly. But you're allowed to start again. Ron looked at her then, really looked, and something inside him cracked open like ice under sunlight. I want to, he whispered. Faith smiled, slow and tender. Then start. He kissed her under the falling snow, the world narrowing to the warmth of her lips and the steady beat of her heart against his. For the first time in years, Ron didn't feel like a man bracing for impact. He felt like a man coming home. Chapter 11, The Turning Point. The kiss lingered like a promise, soft and steady beneath the falling snow. When they finally pulled apart, Ron Garner felt something he hadn't felt in years: lightness. Not the brittle kind that shatters under pressure, but the quiet, solid kind that comes when you stop running. Faith's eyes searched his, her breath misting in the cold. "You okay?" she whispered. Ron nodded, though words felt too small for what was happening inside him. "Better than okay." She smiled, slow and tender, and for a moment, the world was just her. The curve of her lips, the warmth of her hand in his, the way she made the night feel less sharp. Back inside, the cabin buzzed with laughter and music, but Ron barely heard it. He sat near the fire with Faith curled beside him, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. The glow of the tree lights danced across the room, and he realized something startling. He wasn't bracing for impact anymore. For years, he'd lived like a man waiting for the next betrayal, the next crack in the foundation. But tonight, with Faith's hand tangled in his and her family's laughter spilling like warmth through the room, he felt safe. Later, when the others drifted off to bed, Ron and Faith lingered by the fire. The flames crackled softly, shadows flickering across the walls. Faith turned to him, her expression gentle. "You didn't have to tell me about your past," she said quietly. "But I'm glad you did." Ron stared at the fire, words clawing their way up. "I thought cutting ties would fix everything. That if I erased the people who hurt me, I'd erase the hurt too." Faith's fingers brushed his, light as a whisper. "Did it?" He shook his head. "It just made me empty." Faith's gaze held his, steady and warm. "You're not empty now." Ron swallowed hard, the truth settling like snow on quiet ground. "No," he said softly. "I'm not." They talked until the fire burned low, about everything and nothing, about the things that mattered and the things that didn't. Ron told her pieces of the story he'd never said aloud. The Christmas dinner, the silence, the slammed door. Faith listened without judgment, her hand never leaving his. When he finished, she leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't deserve that." Ron's throat tightened. "I believed I did." Faith shook her head, her eyes fierce now. "You deserve better. You deserve this." Her lips brushed his again, and the kiss was different this time. Deeper, surer, like a door swinging open after years of being locked. When they finally pulled apart, Ron rested his forehead against hers, his voice low. "I don't want to lose this." Faith smiled, her breath warm against his skin. "Then don't." And for the first time in 5 years, Ron believed he could keep something good. Chapter 12, Christmas Eve Magic. The cabin was a cathedral of warmth against the winter night. Outside, snow fell in slow spirals, blanketing the mountains in silence. Inside, the fire crackled, casting amber light across garlands and ornaments that shimmered like captured stars. The scent of cinnamon and pine hung in the air, mingling with laughter and the faint strains of carols playing from an old speaker. Ron Garner stood near the tree, watching Faith hang the last ornament, a delicate glass angel that caught the glow of the lights and scattered it like shards of gold. She turned, her cheeks flushed from the fire, her eyes bright with something that made his chest ache. "Perfect," she said softly, stepping back to admire the tree. Ron smiled, though his gaze never left her. "It is." Faith caught his look, and her lips curved into a smile that felt like a secret. "Come on," she said, tugging his hand. Tradition time. The dining table was set with candles flickering in brass holders, their flames dancing like whispers. Faith's family gathered around, voices weaving through the air in a tapestry of warmth. They shared stories, laughter, and a toast to the year ahead. Ron listened, the sound of belonging wrapping around him like a blanket he hadn't realized he needed. After dinner came gifts, small, thoughtful things exchanged with teasing and hugs. Faith handed Ron a box wrapped in silver paper, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Open it," she urged. Ron peeled back the paper to reveal a soft gray scarf, its weave intricate and warm. He ran his fingers over the fabric, something tightening in his throat. "Made it myself," Faith said, almost shy now. "Figured you could use a little extra warmth." Ron looked at her, words failing him. So he did the only thing that felt right. He leaned in and kissed her, slow and sure, the room fading until there was only her. Later, when the family drifted off to bed and the cabin settled into quiet, Ron and Faith lingered by the tree. The lights glowed softly, casting halos across the polished wood floor. A sprig of mistletoe hung above them, courtesy of Hope's earlier mischief. Faith glanced up, then back at him, her smile teasing. "Looks like we're standing in the danger zone." Ron chuckled, his voice low. "Guess we should honor tradition." He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands framing her face as the world outside disappeared into snow and silence. When they broke apart, her forehead rested against his, her breath warm against his skin. "Merry Christmas, Ron," she whispered. For a moment he couldn't speak. Then, with a voice roughened by something he hadn't felt in years, he said, "Merry Christmas, Faith." And for the first time since that night 5 years ago, the words didn't taste like ash. They tasted like hope. Chapter 13, New Year. New chapter. The mountains were hushed under a blanket of snow, the sky inked with stars that glittered like shards of ice. Inside the cabin, laughter spilled from the living room where Faith's family counted down the last minutes of the year. Ron stood near the window, watching the reflection of the firelight flicker against the glass, his thoughts a quiet storm. 5 years ago, he'd walked out of a house that felt like a graveyard, leaving behind everything he thought he needed. He'd sworn off holidays, family, love, anything that could break him again. And yet here he was, standing in a room full of warmth, with a woman who had cracked open the walls he'd built and let the light in. Faith appeared at his side, her cheeks flushed from laughter, her eyes bright as the fire behind her. "You're hiding," she teased softly. "Just thinking," Ron said, his voice low. "Dangerous habit," she murmured, slipping her hand into his. Her fingers were warm, steady. "Want to share?" Ron turned to her, and for once he didn't hesitate. "I thought I was done," he said quietly. "Done with all of this, holidays, family, trusting people. I thought if I kept my world small, I'd be safe." Faith's gaze held his, unwavering. "And now," Ron swallowed hard, the truth rising like dawn. "Now I want more. I want this." His thumb brushed her knuckles, his voice roughening. "I want you." Faith's smile was slow, tender, like a sunrise breaking over snow. "You have me," she whispered. The words hit him like warmth after a long winter. He exhaled, something inside him unclenching for good. "Then I guess I'm the luckiest man alive." The countdown began. 10, 9, 8, and the room filled with voices, laughter, anticipation. Ron pulled Faith closer, his heart pounding in rhythm with the numbers. 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year. Cheers erupted, glasses clinked, and fireworks bloomed in the distance, painting the sky in bursts of color. Ron kissed Faith as the world roared around them, a kiss that tasted like promise, like everything he thought he'd lost and found again. When they broke apart, breathless and smiling, Ron rested his forehead against hers. "New year," he murmured. "New chapter." Faith's eyes shimmered like the fireworks outside. "Let's write it together." And for the first time in 5 years, Ron believed in forever.